November 28, 1944. 8:47 p.m. 30 miles south of Tokyo Bay. Commander Joe Enright grips the periscope handles so hard his knuckles have gone white. The USS Archerfish rocks gently beneath him, suspended in the black water at periscope depth, her diesel engines silent. Through the lens, he can see absolutely nothing. Just darkness. Just the Pacific stretching endlessly in every direction. His executive officer, Dave Bunting, stands behind him in the cramped control room, watching the captain's face for any sign of what he's thinking. The rest of the crew barely breathes. They'd been tracking a contact for 6 hours, something big moving south through Japanese home waters, but they still don't know what it is. Enright has been hunting this target since sunset, when the radar operator picked up a massive surface contact making 17 knots. Too fast for a cargo ship. Too large for a destroyer. Something important enough to warrant 4 escort destroyers arranged in a protective screen. But the ocean is dark. And the Japanese know these waters better than any American submarine crew ever could. "Captain," the sonar operator whispers, though there's no rational reason to keep his voice down. "Contact bearing 030. Range closing. 12,000 yards. Enright doesn't move. He's calculating. The target is zigzagging, changing course every few minutes to throw off any submarine lucky enough to find it. Standard Japanese doctrine. It makes a firing solution nearly impossible. You have to predict where the ship will be, not where it is. And if you're wrong, you've just announced your position to 4 very angry destroyers carrying enough depth charges to crush Archerfish like an empty beer can. Enright has already been here before. 6 months ago, he had a shot at a Japanese carrier, a clean, beautiful setup, and he hesitated. Recalculated. Waited for perfection. The target slipped away. When Archerfish returned to Pearl Harbor, they quietly reassigned him to another boat. The whisper followed him through every corridor. Enright froze. He got his command back only because submarine skippers were dying faster than the Navy could replace them. This is his second chance. Possibly his last. "Come left to 270, he says quietly. "All ahead 1/3. Make your depth 60 feet. The boat responds smoothly, turning through the black water like a predator adjusting its angle of approach. Enright steps back from the periscope and closes his eyes, visualizing the geometry. The target is still 12,000 yards out over 6 miles. Too far for a visual identification. Too far for an attack. But close enough to stay in contact. "We wait," he says to Bunting. "We follow. And when he straightens out even for a minute, we put fish in the water." Bunting nods. But both men know what they're really doing. They're stalking something in the heart of enemy-controlled waters, 50 miles from the Japanese homeland, surrounded by patrol aircraft and destroyer groups that would love nothing more than to depth charge an American sub into oblivion. The smart move would be to break contact. Dive deep. Run silent and live to fight another day. But Enright can still hear the whispers from Pearl Harbor. The sonar operator suddenly stiffens. Sonar. Contact is turning. New course 180. Speed increasing to 18 knots. Enright's eyes snap open. 18 knots. Whatever this thing is, it's big enough to push that speed through the water and still maintain a destroyer escort. That rules out troop transports. Rules out oilers. Rules out everything except battle stations torpedo, Enright says, his voice cutting through the control room like a blade. Red lights flood the compartment. Men scramble to their positions with the practiced efficiency of a crew that's drilled this scenario 100 times. But there's something different in the air now. Something electric. Because deep down, every man aboard Archerfish knows they've just found something worth dying for. They just don't know what it is yet. November 29, 1944. 12:43 a.m. 22 miles south of Honshu. Enright has been tracking the contact for 4 more hours, and his eyes are burning from staring through the periscope. The target has zigged and zagged through every defensive pattern in the Japanese playbook, but Archerfish has stayed with it hanging back just far enough to avoid detection, close enough to maintain sonar contact. The crew is exhausted. They've been at battle stations for over an hour now, bodies tense, waiting for the order that will either make them legends or get them killed. Range 9,000 yards. The fire control officer calls out. His voice is steady, but there's an edge to it. Still zigzagging. Unable to get a firing solution. Enright wipes the sweat from his forehead. The control room is hot, too many bodies generating too much heat in too small a space. Someone needs to crack a joke, break the tension, but nobody does. They're all thinking the same thing. They've followed this target halfway across the Pacific approach lanes, and they still haven't seen it. Captain, Bunting says quietly, stepping closer. We're getting into shallow water. If those destroyers pick us up. I know. We should at least see what we're chasing. Enright looks at him. Bunting's right. They've committed to this hunt based on radar returns and sonar echoes. They're risking the boat, risking 78 lives, and they don't even know what they're trying to kill. Up scope, Enright says. The periscope hisses upward. Enright presses his face against the eyepiece, and for a moment, he sees nothing but black water and distant clouds. The moon is up now, just a sliver, but enough to cast faint silver light across the surface. Then he sees the destroyers first. 4 of them, arranged in a diamond pattern, their bows cutting white foam through the dark sea. They're moving fast, aggressively, weaving back and forth like sheepdogs protecting their flock. And behind them, Enright's breath catches in his throat. Jesus Christ, he whispers. It rises from the ocean like a floating city. The bow alone seems to stretch forever, massive, angular, cutting through the water with a kind of terrible grace. Even in the darkness, he can make out the flight deck, flat and enormous, big enough to land 100 aircraft. The island's superstructure towers above the deck like a steel cathedral. But it's the size that makes his stomach drop. This isn't just a carrier. This is something else entirely. Something he's never seen before. The hull displaces so much water that it creates a wake visible from miles away. The destroyer's ships that would dwarf any American submarine look like toys escorting a Leviathan. Bearing? Enright asks, his voice hoarse. 028, Captain. Speed? 18 knots. Steady course 180. Enright doesn't take his eyes from the periscope. His mind is racing, flipping through mental files of every Japanese carrier ever photographed by American reconnaissance. Akagi, Kaga, Shokaku, Zuikaku. He knows them all by silhouette. This isn't any of them. This is bigger. Much bigger. Fire control, he says slowly. What's the length of that target? There's a pause while the officer calculates based on the bearing rate and range. When he answers, his voice is uncertain, like he doesn't believe his own math. Captain, I'm getting 870 feet. But that can't be right. That would make it bigger than anything afloat. Enright finishes. The control room has gone completely silent. Every man is staring at the captain now, waiting for him to say something that makes sense. Waiting for him to tell them what they're looking at. Enright's mind locks onto an intelligence briefing from 3 months ago. A rumor. A ghost story passed around by codebreakers and photo analysts. The Japanese had been building something in the Yokosuka naval arsenal, something so large that American bombers had tried to hit it 6 times and failed. The reports were fragmented, contradictory. Some said it was a battleship conversion. Others said it was a floating fortress. One analyst, a young lieutenant whose name Enright can't remember, had stood up during the briefing and said something that made everyone laugh. If the reports are accurate, gentlemen, the Japanese have built a carrier larger than the Yamato. Nobody believed him. The Yamato was already the largest battleship ever constructed. The idea of a carrier that size was absurd. Impossible. A waste of resources Japan didn't have. But Enright is looking at it right now. Down scope, he says quietly. The periscope slides down with a hydraulic hiss. Enright turns to face his crew. Every eye in the control room is locked on him. Some of the men look excited. Others look terrified. They all look like they're waiting for him to tell them this is real. Gentlemen, Enright says, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I believe we've just found the Shinano. The name hangs in the air like smoke. Shinano. The ghost ship. The supercarrier that American intelligence said might exist but couldn't confirm. 59,000 tons of steel and aircraft. The third Yamato-class hull, converted mid-construction into the largest aircraft carrier ever built. And it's right there. Less than 5 miles away. Bunting steps forward. Captain, if that's really the Shinano, we have to sink it. Enright looks at him. There's no hesitation in Bunting's eyes. No doubt. Just cold, hard certainty. Because both men know what this means. If they let this ship reach open water, if it becomes operational, it will take 100 American aircraft to bring it down. It will cost dozens of pilots. Hundreds of lives. But if they can put torpedoes into it right now tonight while it's still on its shakedown cruise with a green crew and incomplete defenses. Range? Enright asks. 8,000 yards in closing, Captain. Plot a firing solution. I want 6 fish ready to swim. Spread pattern. And gentlemen, Enright pauses, looking around the control room at faces he's lived with, eaten with, bled with for 8 months. We're only getting one chance at this. Make it count! Of high explosive death into the Pacific night. The crew erupts into controlled chaos. Hands fly across dials. Officers shout coordinates. The torpedo room begins flooding tubes with compressed air, preparing to unleash 21 feet, and somewhere above them, unaware and unsuspecting, the largest warship ever built steams toward its destiny. November 29, 1944. 2:15 a.m. 17 miles south of Tokyo Bay. The waiting is the worst part. Archerfish has been trailing Shinano for another hour and a half, maintaining a careful distance, adjusting speed and depth to match the carrier's erratic zigzag pattern. Enright has stayed glued to the periscope, watching the massive silhouette cut through the moonlit water, waiting for the one thing he needs, a straight course. Just 2 minutes. Maybe 3. Long enough to calculate where the ship will be when his torpedoes arrive. But the Japanese destroyer captains aren't stupid. They're keeping Shinano on an aggressive defensive pattern, turning every 7 to 8 minutes, never holding steady, never giving a submarine the predictable geometry it needs for a kill shot. Captain, the fire control officer says, frustration creeping into his voice. We've had 4 separate solutions fall apart. If they keep zigzagging like this, they'll make a mistake. Enright interrupts. They always do. But even as he says it, he's not sure he believes it. His hands are cramping from gripping the periscope handles. His back aches from standing hunched over for hours. The control room smells like sweat and electrical equipment, and the particular metallic tang of men pushed to their limits. Behind him, he can hear the plotting team working frantically, sliding rulers across charts, calling out bearings and speeds, trying to predict the unpredictable. The torpedo data computer clicks and whirs, processing information that changes every 30 seconds as Shinano weaves through the water like a boxer avoiding punches. Range 7,000 yards, sonar calls out. 7,000. Just over 3 miles. Close enough that if one of those destroyers gets lucky with their sonar, if Archerfish makes one wrong move, creates one stray noise, they'll have depth charges raining down within minutes. Enright watches through the scope as one of the destroyers cuts across Shinano's bow, close enough that he can see the white water churning beneath its stern. The destroyer captain is good. Aggressive. Protecting his charge with the kind of focused intensity that only comes from knowing you're in dangerous waters. But he's also human. And humans get tired. Humans get complacent. Come left to 285. Enright orders. All ahead 2/3. Make your depth 5 feet. Archerfish responds smoothly, turning slightly, rising closer to the surface. Enright is gambling now, moving into shallower water, into a position where the destroyer sonar might pick them up, but also into the geometry he needs. He's like a pool player setting up a complicated bank shot, moving pieces into position for a moment that hasn't happened yet. Captain, Bunting says quietly. We're getting close to the shipping lanes. If there's another convoy coming through. There won't be. But if there is, then we sink the carrier first and worry about it later. Bunting falls silent. They both know what Enright is really saying. This is the shot. This is the moment that will define whether Joe Enright is the captain who froze or the captain who sank the largest warship ever built. There is no middle ground. No second place. Through the periscope, Enright watches Shinano complete another turn. The massive carrier leans slightly to port as it comes around, its enormous bulk defying the basic physics of how something that large should be able to move. He can see details now: the flight deck striping, the island superstructure, even the faint glow of red night lighting through some of the portholes. Somewhere aboard that ship, Japanese sailors are standing watch. Maybe drinking tea. Maybe writing letters home. Maybe sleeping in their bunks, confident that they're sailing the most powerful warship in the world, protected by 4 destroyers and the certain knowledge that no American submarine would dare penetrate this close to the Japanese homeland. They have no idea that 78 American submariners are tracking their every movement, waiting for one mistake. New contact bearing 270! Sonar suddenly calls out. Multiple screws. Sounds like 3 more destroyers, Captain. Range 6,000 yards and closing. Enright's stomach drops. 7 destroyers total now. The protective screen just doubled. The odds of getting a shot off and escaping just went from slim to nearly impossible. Captain? Bunting's voice is tight. We need to make a decision. Enright doesn't answer. His eye is still pressed to the periscope. He's watching Shinano, watching the geometry, watching the angles shift and change with every passing second. The new destroyers are converging from the west, probably a relief group coming out from Tokyo Bay to escort the carrier farther south. Which means they're not in formation yet. Not coordinated with the original 4-destroyer screen. For maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, there will be confusion. Gaps in coverage. A moment of transition where nobody is quite sure who's responsible for which sector. That's when Shinano will be most vulnerable. Range to target? Enright asks. 6,200 yards. Still too far. A long shot. But the new destroyers are closing fast. Enright makes his decision. Increase speed to flank. Course 300. Take us ahead of the formation. The crew stares at him like he's lost his mind. Ahead of the formation means crossing directly in front of Shinano's bow, the most dangerous position possible. If the carrier maintains its current course, they'll run right over Archerfish. If any destroyer picks them up on sonar, they'll be bracketed by depth charges before they can dive deep enough to escape. But it also means they'll be in perfect position for a bow-shot torpedoes fired directly into Shinano's path, impossible to evade, with the carrier's own speed driving it onto the weapons. Captain, Bunting says carefully, if we miscalculate the timing, then we die, Enright says flatly. But if we don't take this shot, that carrier reaches open water and kills 1,000 American pilots over the next 2 years. Your call, Dave. You want to break contact and go home? Bunting looks at him for a long moment. Then he turns to the crew. You heard the captain. Battle stations. Make ready all tubes. The control room explodes into activity. Officers bark orders. The torpedo room reports tubes 1 through 6 flooded and ready. The plotting team frantically recalculates angles and speeds, preparing for a shot that will require split-second timing and perfect execution. Archerfish surges forward through the black water, her diesel engines pushing her toward a point in space that her target hasn't reached yet. Enright watches through the periscope as the distance closes 5,000 yards, 4,000, 3,000. The destroyers are weaving back and forth, but they're focused on the water behind Shinano, searching for threats from the rear. Nobody expects the submarine to be ahead of them. Range 3,000 yards. Sonar whispers. Target course steady at 185. Speed 18 knots. Enright's heart is hammering so hard he can feel it in his temples. Through the scope, he can see Shinano's massive bow, now a steel cliff rising from the ocean, pushing water aside like a mountain shoving through a valley. The flight deck seems to stretch forever, disappearing into the darkness astern. And for the first time in over an hour, the carrier isn't turning. It's holding steady, cutting through the water in a perfectly straight line. Fire control solution? Enright barks. Locked, Captain. Bearing constant. We have a shooting solution. Enright takes one last look through the periscope. He can see every detail now: the anchor chains, the flight deck elevators, even a few sailors moving along the catwalk. 60,000 tons of steel and ambition, carrying the hopes of an empire that's already lost the war but doesn't know it yet. He steps back from the periscope. Fire 1. November 29, 1944. 3:17 a.m. 4 miles south of Inibosaki. The torpedo leaves Tube 1 with a compressed air hiss that shudders through Archerfish's hull. 21 feet of steel and explosives, carrying 643 pounds of Torpex warhead, accelerating to 46 knots as its electric motor spins up to full speed. Fire 2. Another hiss. Another shudder. Fire 3. Enright counts the seconds between each shot, enough spacing to spread the pattern, not so much that Shinano can react and turn. This is the mathematics of murder. Cold. Precise. Unforgiving. Fire 4. Fire 5. Fire 6. 6 torpedoes now, fanning out through the black water in a calculated spread pattern. Each one running at a slightly different angle, creating a wall of explosives that Shinano will drive directly into. The carrier is so large that even if Enright's calculations are off by 50 yards, the torpedoes will still find metal. All fish running hot, straight, and normal, the sonar operator reports. His voice is steady, but his hands are shaking. Time to target, 2 minutes 40 seconds. Enright grabs the intercom microphone. All hands rig for depth charge. Secure all equipment. Silent running protocols in effect immediately. The control room shifts into organized chaos. Men scramble to shut down non-essential systems. The air conditioning goes silent. The ventilation stops. Within seconds, the only sounds are breathing and the faint electric hum of the motors. Take her down, Enright orders. 400 feet. Full dive. Make it fast and quiet. Archerfish tilts forward, her bow dropping as compressed air vents from the ballast tanks. Water floods in, adding weight, pulling the submarine down into the safety of the deep. The deck slants at a 20-degree angle. Men grab onto pipes and valves to keep their balance. Through the hull, they can hear now the screws of the destroyers, churning the water above them. A high-pitched whine that gets louder with every passing second. The Japanese escorts heard the torpedo launches. They know a submarine is here. They just don't know exactly where. Passing 200 feet. The diving officer calls out. Time to impact? Enright asks. 1 minute 30 seconds. Enright closes his eyes. In his mind, he can see the torpedoes racing through the water, 6 white trails of bubbles tracking toward the massive carrier. He can see Shinano's hull, unaware, cutting through the sea at 18 knots. He can see the geometry converging, the moment of impact approaching with mathematical certainty. 300 feet. The pressure is increasing now. The hull creaks and groans as the ocean squeezes tighter. Some of the younger sailors look nervous. They've never been this deep before. But Enright knows Archerfish can handle it. She's a Naval-class boat, built for exactly this kind of punishment. 30 seconds to impact. The control room is absolutely silent now. 78 men holding their breath, listening, waiting for the sound that will tell them whether they've just made history or fired 6 torpedoes into empty ocean. 15 seconds. Enright grips a overhead pipe. His knuckles are white. Every muscle in his body is tensed, waiting for. Boom. The explosion is so loud it feels like someone hit the submarine with a sledgehammer. The hull rings like a bell. Equipment rattles. The lights flicker. Every man in the control room staggers as the shockwave passes through the water, rattling Archerfish like a toy. Boom. A second explosion. Just as loud. maybe louder. The sonar operator rips his headphones off, wincing in pain from the amplified sound. Boom. 3 hits. 3 torpedoes slamming into Shinano's hull with enough explosive force to vaporize steel and punch through armor plating designed to withstand battleship shells. "We got her," Bunting whispers. "Jesus Christ, we got her." But Enright isn't celebrating. He's listening. Counting. Waiting for. Boom. A 4th explosion. Slightly different tone, deeper, more resonant. The kind of sound that means a torpedo didn't just damage a ship. It broke something critical. The control room erupts. Men are shouting, slapping each other on the back, grinning like idiots despite the fact that they're 400 feet underwater with 7 destroyers hunting them. They've just done the impossible. They've just put 4 torpedoes into the largest warship ever built. "Silence!" Enright barks. "We're not clear yet." As if to punctuate his words, they hear at the destroyer's screws overhead, circling, searching. The high-pitched whine grows louder, closer. The Japanese captains know a submarine is down here. They're going to find it. And when they do, they're going to drop enough depth charges to crack Archerfish open like an egg. "Consor," the operator says quietly, his voice tight with fear. "Active sonar. Multiple contacts pinging. They're trying to locate us." Ping. The sound echoes through the hull, a metallic tone that makes everyone's skin crawl. It's the sound of enemy sonar bouncing off their hull, giving away their exact position. The sound of being hunted. Ping. 400 feet, Captain," the diving officer reports. "Leveling off. Maintain depth. All ahead dead slow. Come right to 180. Make absolutely no noise." Archerfish goes through the water, barely moving, every system powered down to the bare minimum. The men don't speak. Some don't even breathe. They're playing the oldest game in submarine warfare, hide and seek with an enemy that has the numbers, the position, and the burning desire for revenge. Above them, through hundreds of feet of black water, they can hear chaos. Destroyer engines racing. High-speed screws thrashing the surface. Voices on radio frequencies, Japanese sailors shouting in confusion and alarm. And beneath it all, a different sound. A horrible, grinding, metallic groan that seems to come from everywhere at once. The sound of Shinano dying. "Con sonar," the operator says, his voice filled with awe. "Breaking up noises. Heavy flooding sounds. She's going down." Enright moves to the sonar station and takes the headphones. He presses one earpiece to his head and listens. It's like hearing a building collapse underwater. The shriek of tearing metal. The thunder of bulkheads imploding. The rush of thousands of tons of water flooding through compartments that were never supposed to see the ocean. Explosions, secondary detonations as fuel tanks rupture and electrical systems short circuit. And beneath it all, faint but unmistakable, the screaming of men. Enright hands the headphones back. His face is expressionless, but his hands are shaking slightly. "How long?" he asks quietly. The sonar operator listens for a moment, his face pale. "She's listing hard to starboard, Captain. I'm hearing major structural failure. At this rate." He pauses, calculating. "Maybe an hour. Maybe less. An hour. 60,000 tons of steel, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The most powerful carrier ever conceived has 60 minutes left to live. 4 torpedoes. Less than 10 minutes of work. That's all it took to doom a ship that thousands of engineers spent years building. Crack. A depth charge explodes somewhere above them, not close enough to damage Archerfish, but close enough to send another shockwave through the hull. The Japanese destroyers are furious, dropping charges at random, hoping to get lucky. "They're not tracking us," Bunting observes. "They're just guessing. They lost us in the noise," Enright says. "When Shinano started breaking up, it masked our signature. But they'll figure it out eventually. We need to." Crack. Crack. 2 more depth charges, closer this time. The lights flicker. Dust rains down from the overhead pipes. Someone in the back of the control room mutters a prayer. "Maintain heading," Enright says calmly. Maintain depth. We're going to creep away nice and slow while they're busy trying to save their carrier. Because that's what the Japanese destroyers are doing now. Enright can hear it through the hull, the change in engine pitch as the escorts abandon their search pattern and rush back to Shinano's side. They're deploying rescue boats, rigging tow lines, trying desperately to save a ship that's already beyond saving. It's the humane thing to do, the honorable thing. It's also the thing that's going to let Archerfish escape. Time? Enright asks. 0347 hours, Captain. 30 minutes since the torpedoes hit. 30 minutes since they changed the course of naval history. And they're still alive. Enright allows himself the smallest smile. Gentlemen, he says quietly. Well done. November 29th, 1944. 4:53 a.m. 12 miles south of Inabosaki. Captain Toshio Abe stands on Shinano's bridge wing, watching his ship die. The list to starboard has reached 17 degrees now. Maybe 20. It's hard to tell anymore. The massive flight deck designed to launch 100 aircraft into battle is tilted at such an angle that anything not bolted down has already slid into the ocean. He can hear it constantly, the crash of equipment, the splash of debris hitting the water, the screams of men trying to maintain their footing on decks that have become steep slopes. Behind him, in the bridge, damage control officers are shouting into telephones that no longer work. The electrical systems failed 20 minutes ago. Emergency lighting casts everything in a hellish red glow. Smoke is seeping up through the deck plates, not the black smoke of fire, but the white chemical haze of seawater hitting hot machinery. Captain, his executive officer says, appearing at his elbow. The man's uniform is soaked through, and there's blood on his forehead from where he hit something during the first explosion. Compartments 7 through 14 are completely flooded. We've lost all power to the steering. The pumps can't keep up. Sir, we need to give the order. Abe doesn't respond immediately. He's watching the destroyers circle his ship like worried children around a dying parent. They've come alongside, trying to rig tow cables, but Shinano is too large. Too heavy. Trying to tow her is like trying to drag a mountain. 162 minutes ago, he was the captain of the most powerful warship ever built. The Shinano was supposed to be unsinkable, her hull reinforced with armor plating salvaged from the Yamato-class battleship design, her compartmentalization so sophisticated that the designers promised she could survive 20 torpedo hits. 4 torpedoes. That's all it took. 4 American torpedoes hitting her at exactly 3:17 a.m., punching through her starboard side below the waterline, flooding her machinery spaces before the damage control teams even understood what was happening. The engineers had built a magnificent ship, but they'd forgotten to train the crew how to save it. How many men below decks? Abe asked quietly. The executive officer hesitates. We're not sure, sir. Communications are down. But engineering division, damage control parties, the machinery spaces. He trails off. They both know what he's saying. Hundreds of men. Maybe 1,000. Trapped in flooded compartments, clawing at watertight doors that can't be opened from the inside, drowning in the darkness while their captain stands on the bridge and does nothing. The Americans, Abe says. Did we get them? No, sir. The submarine escaped. The destroyers lost contact during that. He pauses, searching for the right word. During the confusion. Confusion. That's a polite way of saying panic. When the torpedoes hit, every destroyer broke formation and raced toward Shinano, abandoning the search pattern, ignoring doctrine, focused entirely on saving the carrier. It was exactly what the submarine captain wanted them to do. By the time anyone thought to resume the hunt, the American boat was long gone. Abe almost laughs. Almost. The irony is too perfect. He's the captain of the largest warship in history, protected by 7 destroyers and the entire might of the Imperial Japanese Navy, and he's been defeated by 1 submarine. 1 American captain who had the skill and the courage to penetrate Japanese home waters and put 4 torpedoes exactly where they needed to be. Captain? The executive officer's voice is insistent now. The ship, sir. We're out of time. Abe looks down at the flight deck. He can see sailors struggling to launch lifeboats, but the list is so severe that half the boats can't be lowered. They're trapped in their davits, useless. Men are jumping directly into the water now, 60-foot drops into the freezing Pacific, hoping they survive the impact, hoping the destroyers will fish them out before hypothermia sets in. The Shinano groans a long, low sound like a wounded animal. The entire ship shudders. Somewhere deep in her hull, another bulkhead has failed. More compartments flooding. More weight pulling her down. Sound abandoned ship, Abe says quietly. The executive officer stares at him. Sir? Sound abandoned ship, Abe repeats, his voice firmer now. Get the men off. Anyone who can swim, put them in the water. Everyone else, life jackets, and hope the destroyers get to them in time. What about you, Captain? Abe doesn't answer. They both know the answer. Japanese naval tradition is very clear about what a captain does when his ship goes down. There is only one honorable choice. The executive officer salutes a sharp, precise gesture that somehow maintains dignity despite the chaos. Then he turns and rushes into the bridge to give the orders. The abandoned ship alarm starts wailing a long, mournful sound that cuts through the noise of destruction. Men begin pouring out of hatches, scrambling up ladders, fighting their way to the high side of the ship where the list is least severe. Some are calm. Others are crying. All of them are 18, 19, 20 years old. Boys who joined the Navy thinking they'd serve on the mightiest warship ever built, and who are now jumping into the ocean in the darkness, praying they survive the next hour. Abe watches a young sailor, can't be more than 17, standing at the edge of the flight deck, looking down at the water 60 feet below. The boy is frozen, terrified, unable to make himself jump. An officer appears behind him, says something Abe can't hear, and then gently pushes him over the edge. The boy plummets, hits the water with a splash, and surfaces seconds later, swimming frantically toward the nearest destroyer. Good, Abe thinks. Live. Go home. Tell them what happened here. The Shinano lists further. 25 degrees now. Maybe 30. The flight deck is at such an angle that Abe has to grip the railing to avoid sliding. He can feel it in the deck beneath his feet. The ship is losing her battle with the ocean. The water is winning. It was always going to win. Through the smoke and darkness, he can see the destroyers pulling men from the water. They're working frantically, dropping cargo nets, throwing life rings, doing everything they can to save Shinano's crew. It won't be enough. There are too many men in the water. Too much chaos. Too little time. Abe looks up at the sky. The stars are still visible, brilliant points of light scattered across the darkness. Orion. The Pleiades. The same stars his ancestors navigated by centuries ago. The same stars that will be here long after everyone aboard Shinano is dead and forgotten. He thinks about the American submarine captain. Wonders what kind of man he is. Wonders if he's celebrating right now, toasting with his crew, knowing he's just sunk the largest warship in history. Or if he's like Abe, standing in silence, thinking about all the lives he's just taken, all the futures he's just erased with 4 carefully aimed torpedoes. Probably both. The ship groans again. Louder this time. The sound of steel tearing, rivets popping, structure failing. Abe doesn't need a damage control report to know what's happening. The flooding has reached a critical point. Shinano has maybe minutes left now. Maybe less. He walks into the bridge one last time. The space is almost empty now, just a few junior officers still trying to maintain some kind of order, though there's nothing left to command. The helm is unmanned. The charts are scattered across the floor. The radio is dead. Go, Abe tells them. That's an order. Get off the ship. They hesitate, looking at him with a mixture of respect and fear. Go, he shouts. They go. Running, stumbling, scrambling down ladders and through hatches, desperate to reach the open air before the ship takes them down. Within seconds, Abe is alone. He walks to the captain's chair, a simple leather seat with brass fittings, and sits down. The chair is bolted to the deck at a perfect 90-degree angle, which means Abe is now sitting at a 30-degree tilt, like he's on some kind of carnival ride. He almost laughs again. Doesn't. Through the bridge windows, he can see the ocean rising. The ship is rolling now slowly at first, then faster. The destroyers are backing away, putting distance between themselves and the dying carrier, afraid they'll be caught in the suction when she goes under. Smart, Abe thinks. Save yourselves? The water reaches the flight deck edge. Then it's pouring across the deck in a rushing torrent, a river of ocean reclaiming what humans tried to steal from it. The ship rolls further. 45 degrees. 50. The bridge is tilting so severely that Abe has to grip his chair to avoid falling. And then, with a sound like the world ending, the Shinano capsizes. November 29, 1944. 5:47 a.m. 14 miles south of Inibosaki. The ocean is silent now. 400 feet below the surface, Enright stands in Archerfish's control room, listening through the sonar operator's headphones. For the last 20 minutes, they've been tracking the death throes of Shinano, the groaning metal, the rushing water, the muffled explosions of air pockets collapsing under pressure. And then, 3 minutes ago, it stopped. Just stopped. The ocean went quiet. No more breaking up noises. No more structural failure. Just the distant sound of destroyer screws and the faint rush of current moving past Archerfish's hull. She's gone, the sonar operator whispers. Sir, she's gone. Enright removes the headphones and hands them back. His hands are steady now, but his face is blank. Unreadable. The control room is silent. Every man knows what they've just done. Every man is processing it in their own way. Bunting clears his throat. Captain, we should put some distance between us and those destroyers. They're still searching. Enright nods slowly. Come left to 090. All ahead 1/3. Maintain depth 400 feet. Silent running protocols remain in effect. Archerfish turns smoothly and begins creeping away from the scene, moving like a ghost through the black water. Behind them, 7 Japanese destroyers circle the spot where the largest warship in history disappeared beneath the waves. They're searching for survivors. Dropping life rafts. Picking up men who've been treading water for over an hour in near-freezing temperatures. They're not looking for the submarine anymore. Not yet. They're too focused on the human cost of what just happened. How long until we can surface? Someone asks quietly. Dawn is in 43 minutes. Bunting answers. But we should stay down until we're at least 30 miles clear. Maybe longer. They'll have patrol aircraft up as soon as there's light. Enright moves to the navigation table and stares down at the chart. A simple pencil mark shows where Shinano went down 34 degrees, 17 minutes north. 139 degrees, 53 minutes east. Just a dot on a piece of paper. Nothing to indicate that this spot now marks one of the most significant naval engagements of the war. Casualties? Enright asks. None aboard Archerfish, sir. Bunting reports. Some minor injuries from the depth-charging Seaman Miller has a sprained wrist. Petty Officer Chin has a cut on his forehead, but everyone's ambulatory. We took no serious damage. 78 American sailors. All alive. All going home. Enright doesn't ask about Shinano's casualties. He doesn't need to. A carrier that size would have had a crew of at least 2,500 men. Maybe 3,000. He saw them abandoning ship, jumping into freezing water, scrambling onto destroyers, clinging to debris in the darkness. Some of them made it. Most of them didn't. 3,000 lives ended because Enright put 4 torpedoes in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Sir? Bunting's voice pulls him back to the present. Are you all right? Fine, Enright says automatically. Then, more honestly, I will be. The crew is starting to relax now. The immediate danger has passed. Men are speaking in normal voices again, moving around the control room without the forced silence of the last 6 hours. Someone makes a joke about the depth charging, something about Japanese destroyers having terrible aim, and a few people laugh. It's forced, nervous laughter, but it's something. They're processing. coming down from the adrenaline. Remembering that they're still alive, still breathing, still here. Captain, the radio operator calls out. I'm picking up Japanese voice traffic. A lot of it. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Can you make out what they're saying? The operator listens for a moment, his face scrunched in concentration. His Japanese is basic, picked up from listening to enemy transmissions, but it's enough. They're coordinating rescue operations, sir. Calling for more ships. Medical supplies. He pauses. They're also reporting the loss to Tokyo. Using the carrier's name. Shinano. They're confirming it's gone. The control room goes quiet again. Hearing it confirmed like that, hearing the Japanese themselves acknowledge the loss, makes it real in a way that sonar readings and periscope observations never could. They really did it. They really sank the Shinano. Anything about us? Enright asks. They know it was a submarine, sir. American. They're describing our general position from 2 hours ago, but... The operator allows himself a small smile. They have no idea where we are now. Good. That means Archerfish has time. Time to put distance between herself and the Japanese home islands. Time to get back to open ocean where American submarines operate with relative safety. Time to make it back to Pearl Harbor and tell the story of what happened tonight. Assuming anyone believes them. Sir? Bunting steps closer, lowering his voice. When we get back to Pearl, they're going to want proof. Photos. Corroboration. You know how submarine command is, they don't credit kills without evidence. Enright does know. He's heard the stories. Submarine captains returning from patrol, claiming they sank battleships or carriers, only to have their claims denied because the evidence wasn't conclusive enough. Some captains got credit for targets that turned out to be cargo ships. Others got nothing despite sinking major warships. The politics of submarine warfare. The bureaucracy of death. We have the sonar tapes, Enright says. The plotting team's calculations. The fire control solution. The torpedo expenditure logs. And 7 Japanese destroyers that are currently fishing their sailors out of the ocean. That's not proof enough. It should be, Bunting says carefully. But Shinano was a ghost. Intelligence wasn't even sure she existed. If we go back and tell them we sank a 60,000-ton carrier that most analysts thought was a myth. He trails off, leaving the implication hanging. They'll think we're lying. Or crazy. Or both. Enright straightens up. Then intelligence is going to have to update their files. Because I saw her. You saw her. 78 men aboard this boat saw her through the periscope. And now she's on the bottom of the Pacific with 4 American torpedoes embedded in her hull. He says it with absolute conviction. The kind of certainty that comes from knowing, truly knowing that you've just changed history. Whether the bureaucrats in Pearl Harbor believe it or not doesn't matter. What matters is that somewhere above them, the sun is about to rise on a Pacific Ocean that no longer contains the largest warship ever built. Course steady at 090, Captain. The helmsman reports. Making 7 knots at 400 feet. Very well. Maintain course and speed. The hours crawl by. Archerfish continues her slow, silent escape, creeping away from Japanese waters mile by careful mile. The crew rotates through watch stations. Men eat cold sandwiches and drink lukewarm coffee. The boat settles into the familiar rhythm of long-distance submarine travel, boring, cramped, uncomfortable, but alive. At 0823 hours, Enright finally gives the order to surface. Archerfish rises from the depths like a breaching whale, her conning tower breaking through the surface into bright morning sunlight. The hatch cracks open with a hiss of equalized pressure, and fresh air, blessed, beautiful fresh air, floods into the boat. Enright climbs the ladder to the bridge, Bunting right behind him. The ocean stretches in every direction, empty, blue, peaceful. No destroyers. No patrol aircraft. Just endless water and a cloudless sky. Behind them, somewhere beyond the horizon, 7 Japanese destroyers are still searching for bodies. Funeral pyres are being prepared. Families are receiving telegrams that their sons, husbands, and brothers will not be coming home. And in Tokyo, Imperial Naval Headquarters is trying to explain how the most powerful warship ever built survived less than 20 hours at sea before an American submarine sent her to the bottom. Enright fills his lungs with clean air and closes his eyes. The sun is warm on his face. The wind is cool. Archerfish rocks gently in the swells, her diesels rumbling to life, charging the batteries that kept them alive through 6 hours of silent running. "Set course for Pearl Harbor," he says quietly. "Let's go home." December 15, 1944. 1,400 hours. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The jeep carrying Enright pulls up to the submarine base headquarters, and he can already tell something is different. There are too many officers waiting on the steps. Too much brass. Captains and commanders he doesn't recognize, all standing at attention, all watching as he climbs out of the vehicle still wearing his patrol-stained khakis that smell like diesel fuel and recycled air. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander, Submarine Force Pacific Fleet, is standing front and center. The man who decides which captains get promoted and which ones get quietly reassigned to desk jobs. The man who reads every patrol report, every contact analysis, every torpedo expenditure log with the critical eye of someone who knows exactly how easy it is to inflate your achievements when you're alone in the Pacific with no witnesses. Enright salutes. Lockwood returns it, then does something unexpected. He smiles. "Captain Enright," Lockwood says, his voice carrying across the assembled officers. "Welcome home." "Thank you, sir." "Walk with me." They move away from the crowd, heading toward the harbor where submarines are tied up in neat rows along the piers. Archerfish is among them now, already being serviced, refueled, rearmed for her next patrol. Her crew has scattered to the barracks, the mess halls, the bars in Honolulu where submariners go to forget what they've seen and done. "Your patrol report made for interesting reading," Lockwood says carefully. "Very interesting." Here it comes, Enright thinks. The polite skepticism. The gentle suggestion that maybe he misidentified the target. That maybe it wasn't as large as he thought. That maybe. "We've confirmed it," Lockwood continues. "Tokyo Rose announced it 2 days ago. Tried to spin it as a tragic accident, claimed the Shinano hit a mine. But our intelligence intercepts tell a different story. The Japanese Naval General Staff is in chaos. They've launched an investigation into how a submarine penetrated their coastal defenses. They've relieved 3 destroyer captains of command." Enright stops walking. "Sir? You did it, Joe." Lockwood turns to face him directly. "You sank her. The Shinano. 59,000 tons. The largest warship ever sunk by a submarine in the history of naval warfare. Hell, the largest warship ever sunk by anything, period." The words hang in the air between them. Enright has spent the last 2 weeks trying to convince himself that it really happened, that it wasn't some fever dream brought on by too many hours at periscope depth. But hearing it confirmed by the Admiral makes it undeniably real. "How many casualties?" Enright asks quietly. Lockwood's smile fades. "Japanese reports are fragmentary. They're trying to suppress the information. But based on what we've pieced together from intercepts, somewhere between 800 and 1,200 men. The destroyers rescued about 1,700. Enright does the math. 3,000 crew. 1,700 survivors. 1,200 dead. 1,200 men who drowned in the darkness because he put 4 torpedoes exactly where they needed to be. "Joe." Lockwood's voice is gentler now. "Look at me." Enright meets his eyes. "You did your job," Lockwood says. "You did it better than almost any submarine captain in this war. That carrier would have killed thousands of American pilots if it had become operational. You saved lives. Remember that." "Yes, sir. The Navy is putting you in for the Navy Cross. Your crew gets commendation medals. And Archerfish." Lockwood gestures toward the submarine, barely visible among the others. "She's going down in history as the boat that did the impossible." The Navy Cross. The second highest military decoration for valor. Just below the Medal of Honor. Enright should feel proud. Honored. validated. Instead, he just feels tired. When does Archerfish go back out? He asks. Lockwood studies him for a long moment. You've earned leave, Captain. 2 months. Maybe 3. Go home. See your family. Forget about the war for a while. I'd rather not, sir. If it's all the same to you. Joe. With respect, Admiral, I'd rather be at sea. The crew is trained. The boat is ready. And there are still Japanese carriers out there that need sinking. Lockwood shakes his head slowly. You're just like the rest of them. Can't sit still. Can't stop hunting. He sighs. Fine. 1 month of leave. Non-negotiable. After that, we'll talk about your next patrol. Deal? Deal, sir. They shake hands, a simple gesture between two men who understand the weight of command, the burden of sending young sailors into harm's way and hoping they come back alive. One more thing, Lockwood says. The press wants to interview you. Life magazine. The New York Times. They want photos, quotes, the whole story. The Navy could use some good publicity right now. Enright grimaces. Sir, I'd really rather not. That's an order, Captain. You're a war hero now, whether you like it or not. Smile for the cameras. Tell them how brave your crew was. Give the people back home something to feel good about. Lockwood's expression softens slightly. And maybe leave out the part about the 1,200 Japanese sailors. Focus on the victory, not the cost. Focus on the victory, not the cost. That's the entire war in one sentence, Enright thinks. But he nods anyway. Yes, sir. 3 weeks later. The photograph appears on the cover of Life magazine, Commander Joseph Enright standing on Archerfish's bridge, the Pacific Ocean stretching behind him, looking every inch the heroic submarine Captain America needs him to be. The article is titled, The Man Who Sank the Unsinkable. It talks about the daring penetration of Japanese waters, the 6-hour chase, the perfect firing solution, the 4 torpedoes that changed naval history. It mentions the size of the Shinano, 59,000 tons, larger than any warship ever built. It quotes Enright saying all the right things about duty, honor, and the bravery of his crew. It doesn't mention the 1,200 men who drowned. Doesn't mention Captain Toshio Abe going down with his ship. Doesn't mention the Japanese sailors pulled from freezing water, traumatized and broken, who would spend the rest of their lives wondering how the unsinkable ship sank. The article ends with a stirring paragraph about American ingenuity and determination. About how the tiny submarine defeated the mighty carrier. David versus Goliath. The American way. Enright reads it once, then puts the magazine in a drawer and doesn't look at it again. 50 years later. November 29, 1994. A hotel conference room in San Diego, California. Enright sits at a table on a small stage, facing an audience of submarine veterans, naval historians, and a handful of journalists who still care about World War II stories. He's 83 years old now. His hair is white. His hands shake slightly from age and old injuries. But his eyes are still sharp, still alert. Commander Enright, one of the historians asks. Looking back after 50 years, how do you feel about sinking the Shinano? It's a question he's been asked 1,000 times. At reunions. At memorial services. At ceremonies where they pin medals on old men and pretend war is glorious. Usually, he gives the standard answer. Proud of his crew, honored to have served, grateful for the opportunity to defend his country. But today, maybe because he's old, maybe because he's tired of lying, he tells the truth. I think about Captain Abe, Enright says quietly. The Japanese commander. He went down with his ship. Naval tradition, you know. I've spent 50 years wondering what he was thinking in those last moments. If he was angry. If he was scared. If he thought about his family. The room is silent. I think about the 1,200 men who died that night. Kids, most of them. 18, 19 years old. Same age as my crew. They didn't choose to build that carrier. Didn't choose to go to war. They just followed orders, same as we did. He pauses, looking out at the audience. I did my job. I did it well. And I'd do it again if I had to, because that's what war is. You kill people before they kill you, and you try not to think too hard about the human cost. But don't ask me to celebrate it. Don't ask me to feel good about sending 3,000 men into the ocean in the middle of the night. Another pause. We won. They lost. History says I'm a hero. But heroes shouldn't have to spend 50 years trying to forget the faces of the men they killed. The room stays silent for a long moment after he finishes. Then, slowly, one person starts clapping. Then another. Then the entire audience is standing, applauding an old submarine captain who finally told them what war really feels like. Enright sits there, accepting the applause, wondering if Captain Abe's family, somewhere in Japan, knows that the American who killed him has spent half a century carrying their father's ghost. Probably not. That's the thing about war. The winners get parades and medals and magazine covers. The losers get graves and grief and silence. And the men who did the actual fighting, on both sides, get to spend the rest of their lives trying to reconcile the person they became with the person they used to be.